Distinguished colleagues, principal functionaries of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, especially from the Federal Ministry of Justice, led by the Permanent Secretary, Solicitor General of the Federation, as well as other heads of agencies and parastatals in the Federal Ministry of Justice. Very distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the press. Before my opening remarks, I would like us to take introduction. So I am Michael Opeyemi Bamidele. I represent the Ekiti Central Senatorial District, and by the grace of God, the chairman of the committee. It's really my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of our distinguished colleagues and on behalf of the leadership of the Senate to the 2022 budget defense hearing of the Federal Ministry of Justice and its parastatals. As you are aware, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, on Thursday, 7th October 2022, presented before the joint sitting of the National Assembly the 2022 national budget in line with Section 81, Sub 1 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as altered. Thereafter, the Senate deliberated on the general principles of the appropriation bill and resolved to refer it to standing committees for further legislative action. And the standing committees, being subcommittees under the Appropriations Committee for the purpose of consideration of money bills, are expected to carry out a thorough and painstaking budget defense exercise and report back accordingly. The legislative exercise is one of the most viable legislative activities aimed at ensuring equitable distributions of the country's resources with regards to allocation and the implementation of projects and infrastructure to meet the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians. Therefore, the importance of this exercise is not only sacrosanct for the socio-economic and political development of the country, but also germane towards providing democratic dividends to the citizenry. In view of the importance of this exercise, the Senate on Tuesday, 13th October 2021, adjourned its plenary sitting to enable standing committees embark on legislative oversight responsibility visits to MDAs for the purpose of appraising the implementation and performance of the 2021 Appropriation Act in order to pave way for budget defense exercise that we are here for today. It is noteworthy to state that the committee resolved to hold this budget defense today in order to keep to the time frame within which committees are expected to report back to the Senate Appropriation Committee. This is necessary in order to fast-track the passage of the 2022 budget before the end of the year. Thereafter, the committee will proceed with the oversight responsibilities visit, which would equally enable the committee to ascertain the veracity of how the allocations for the various MDAs under the ministry in the 2021 Appropriation Act were utilized. This visit, no doubt, will provide opportunities for interactive sessions whereby the committee will be briefed about any challenges and constraints encountered in the course of the implementation of the 2021 budget by the MDAs. Having said that, I wish to state that the 2022 budget estimates for the Federal Ministry of Justice and its parastatals and agencies, as contained in the appropriation bill before the National Assembly, is 61 billion and 29 million 472,666 naira only. Kindly note that this total sum is inclusive of the allocations to the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, which is not an agency under the jurisdiction of this committee. Also, the statutory transfer to the National Human Rights Commission, which is an independent statutory body and not one of the agencies under the Federal Ministry of Justice, is included in the sum. Therefore, the actual budgetary proposal for the Ministry of Justice and its parastatals that concern this committee with respect to today's exercise, after deducting allocations to the aforesaid institutions, is 18,377,183,815 naira only. After deducting the allocations to the NDLEA, which is 38,152,288,851 naira only, and the National Human Rights Commission allocation, which is 4,500,000 naira only. And below are the comparative analysis of the 2021 budgetary allocation against the 2020 budget proposals as per the MDAs under the Federal Ministry of Justice. Ministry of Justice Headquarters. Total allocation for 2021 was 7,720,778,359 naira only, while for 2022 estimates, it's 11,316,387,398 naira only, which signals an increase of 3,595,609,039 naira. And for the Nigerian Law Reform Commission, the total allocation for 2021 budget was 525,116,536 naira. And for 2022 budget estimates, total is 595,606,798 naira, which again is an increase by 70,490,262 naira only. For Legal Aid Council, total allocation for 2021 budget was 1,276,713,258 naira, and for 2022 total is 1,322,177,175 naira, an increase of 45,463,907 naira. Council of Legal Education, total allocation for 2021, 1,483,267,138 naira, and for 2022 estimates, 2,558,626,851 naira only, an increase of 1,759,713 naira only. Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, total allocation for 2021 was 978,361,032 naira only, while for 2022 is a total of 1,014,392,443 naira, signaling an increase of 36,031,411 naira. Nigerian Copyright Commission, total allocation for 2021 budget 714,392,443 and 59,977 naira. For 2022 estimate, 1,420,900,327 naira, which means an increase of 706,840,350 naira. And finally, for Regional Center for International Commercial Arbitration, total allocation for 2021 was 107,582,795 naira only. And for 2022, budget estimate total of 149,092,823 naira, signaling an increase of 31,510,028 naira. That is the summary of our budget analysis. And having said this, I want to thank you, Honorable Minister, and all the accompanying heads of agencies for your attention. So, Honorable Minister, we will take your response, and then, of course, there will be two parts to your response. The first one will be to kind of take us through quickly the budget performance report on 2021 as a condition precedent for the consideration, the presentation of the budget proposal for 2022. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
It is indeed humbling and heartwarming for me and my team from the justice sector to make concise and wholesale presentations on 2022 budget defense of our statutory activities to this distinguished committee. I wish to thank you immensely for your diligent and unwavering, long-standing support for the justice sector. Your solid support has galvanized the operations of Federal Ministry of Justice and the parastatals under the supervision of the Federal Ministry of Justice in many ways than one, for which we appreciate and shall always take you into confidence in our collective quest to deepen the rule of law and entrench our maturing democracy. The rule of law, as practiced all over the world, is the pivot upon which democracy revolves. The justice sector, as presently constituted, is bedeviled by funding inadequacies, too much for our comfort. The prime drivers of any given maturing democracy, such as ours, are the rule of law, due process of law, human rights, international obligations and allied matters. International obligations and indeed allied matters. Evidence reveals that administration of justice, which guarantees sustained peace, equity and fair play, is undeniably capital intensive. In the circumstances, we need to reconceptualize the existing funding pattern of the justice sector. Lamentably, however, practically all the parastatals under the purview of the Federal Ministry of Justice are in dire need of funding. For me, this is as dangerous as it is disturbing, because funding gaps in the face of competing challenges could endanger effective administration of justice and cause unwarranted travesty of justice. True enough, the justice sector is not primarily a revenue-generating subsector. This is because our constitutional obligations revolve around social services geared towards a peaceful, cohesive, and prosperous Nigeria. As a subsector, our revenue derives essentially from our constitutional activities and returns such as value-added tax, withholding tax, stamp duties, return on DTA, certified true copies, earnings from the use of government halls, tenders fees, earnings from sales of government on serviceable vehicles, sales of law books and journals, and rent of government properties. However, the ministry was mandated to embark on the recovery of looted assets, and we have recorded appreciable milestones in this regard, as monies recovered are promptly deposited into government treasury, thereby increasing the revenue profile of the government. Presently, we are making efforts to ensure that we allocated some cost of collection from recovered funds to finance our recovery operations, in view of the fact that even when we have recorded tremendous success of recovering around $1 billion over time, yet there is not a single kobo allocation in the direction of such recoveries. To date, there are large sums of illicit money stashed abroad, for which we are working at close quarters with ICPC and EFCC as defendable allies to effect recovery of same. The ministry handles public prosecution and civil litigation for the Federation and sometimes outsources these services, particularly as it relates to being prosecuted internally, where state council have internationally, where legal limitations are placed on state council to prosecute. We all know that legal services, especially litigations, are not cheap. Furthermore, the justice sector reforms we are currently undertaking are costly to execute. We therefore need your kind support with adequate funding to successfully prosecute them. To present reoccurrence of a case similar to fee and ID, Council, the Federal Executive Council, directed the Attorney General of the Federation to present a memo for the establishment of federal task force to review and validate contracts, judgments, and arbitral awards and implement the federal verification system to prevent abuses similar to the case of fee and ID. Federal Executive Council directed the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation Minister of Justice to incorporate the funding requirements of the Federal Contract Administration System in Nigeria and the Federal Ministry of Justice's 2022 budget proposal. The capital and overhead components of the FCAS are therefore accordingly incorporated in the 2022 budget. As 2022 beckons, I'm looking forward to a more refreshing feeling of common bond between the justice sector and all the distinguished senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for a seamless administration of justice in Nigeria. Yeah. In conclusion, Your Excellency, and with particular regard to the prayers of our distinguished Senator Manager, it is my conclusion that the year 2021 is rolling to an end, and I can state without mincing words that the year is rife with fair and unfair challenges arising from competing needs and demands, especially given the unending COVID-19 pandemic kidnapping, and armed banditry challenges, among others. In the face of scarce but allocated resources, and granted the fact that the justice sector superintends over the rule of law, it is hereby reasoned that we should reconceptualize the justice architecture in tandem with the vital role of justice delivery and administration in a heterogeneous society such as ours. If we are to crystallize our democracy firmly, it is incumbent on us to build a bridge across justice, covering a broad spectrum of activities because of our plural composition and divergent views on national issues. The year 2022 is another defining moment in the annals of our history. In any event, Federal Ministry of Justice shall do its level best at ensuring that the nuances of politics do not compromise our justice dispensation. We need your support with adequate funding to achieve these feats. Mr. Chairman, sir, we have presented before you the 2022 budget proposal and performance report presented to the Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights, and Legal Matters. By the presentation, Mr. Chairman, we started with the review of the 2021 budget. I believe a copy of the performance has been presented and circulated among the distinguished members of the committee. I will proceed, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, to address. Thank you very much. To address the issues relating to review of the 2021 budget. In paragraph 1 of the report as presented, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, you find the personnel cost, which is 2,852,966,007 naira 0 kobo, which was indeed the personnel cost provided relating to the 2021 budget. So item Roma 2, Mr. Chairman, is an overhead cost excluding legal services, which is 996,326,967 naira. The legal services component, which is listed as Roman 3, is 2,514,608 naira. For the capital, Your Excellency, which is itemized as Roman 4, the sum of 1,870,970,780 naira was expended. This brings the total budget review in that direction to 7,720,778,359 naira. Below the summary, Mr. Chairman, you find breakdown of the items listed: personnel cost, generally inclusive of the salaries and wages, non-regular allowances having been provided. As it relates to item B, which is overhead cost expenditure, Mr. Chairman, out of the total sum of 2,996,841,572 appropriated for the main ministry's overhead cost operations in 2021 financial year, the total sum of 2,247,632,179 naira 24 kobo has been released as at 30th September 2021, representing 75% of the appropriation. The appropriation releases, expenditure, variances, and percentage implementation performance are as shown on table 1, hereby attached as Appendix A. On the issue of capital expenditure, which is item C, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee, from the appropriation sum of 1,870,970,780 naira 0 kobo for capital cost expenditure, the sum of 1,523,205,867 naira 60 kobo has been released. This appropriated amount was to cover the following capital projects as contained in the 2021 appropriation. Below is a table giving an insight as to the capital projects that were meant to be serviced by the said appropriation. In terms of revenue, Mr. Chairman, which is item D, as contained in page 3, as you are aware, the Federal Ministry of Justice is not primarily a higher revenue generating agency. Nevertheless, the sum of 40,119,665 naira 87 kobo was generated as at 30th September 2021. This, Your Excellency may wish to note, does not include the recoveries being made by the Federal Ministry of Justice that runs into billions of naira, which equally constituted a budget item. I am not in a position to give you with precision the amount that has been indeed generated arising from the recovery of looted asset exercise of it, but Your Excellency, I wish to report that it runs into billions. When I talk of revenue generated as it relates to item D, I am specifically making reference to the revenue generated arising from the limited services being provided by the Federal Ministry as it relates to value-added tax, tender fee, among others. Your Excellency, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee, I now proceed with the submissions on the 2022 budget. The ministry submitted a budget proposal of the sum of 11,820,446,099 naira for the 2022 financial year. This, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, consist of the following. 1. Personnel cost. The presentation made by the ministry as it relates to personnel cost is 3,970,581,732 naira 0 kobo. Item Roman 2 is overhead cost exclusive of legal services, in respect of which 2,401,427,464 naira 0 kobo has been presented. Roman 3, Your Excellency, the Chairman, we presented a legal services component of 2,514,608 naira 0 kobo. For the capital relating to the 2022 budget submissions, we presented a proposal of 3,510,922,295 naira 0 kobo. This, Your Excellency, the Chairman, brings the 2022 budget submissions presented by the Federal Ministry of Justice to 11,820,446,099 naira 0 kobo. The breakdown of this component, Your Excellency, has been presented below the summary provided as proposed. For the personnel cost, 3,907,581,732 kobo. For the overhead cost, 4,401,942,072 naira 0 kobo. The respective information arising from this component has been provided by way of a simple literature. Your Excellency, as it relates to capital expenditure proposal as presented by way of summary, which is indeed 3,510,922,000 295 naira 0 kobo, which was indeed appropriated for the 2022 capital cost meant to procure and service the it was meant to procure and service the underlisted items. At page 4, Mr. Chairman, description of the components that was meant to be serviced by the capital expenditure is provided. Roman 1, prosecution of prison inmates, maritime, offshore offenses, Boko Haram suspect, offenders of government, recovered assets, and then improving asset recovery and monitoring access. For that component, 308 million has been provided. Law and development, 120 million has been provided. Documentation, digitization, data entry, storage, and archiving of files and records, 314 million has been provided. Administration of criminal justice reform and monitoring, 479 million. International cooperation and diplomacy, international comparative law, 203 million. Establishment of federal task force and development of federal contract administration system in Nigeria, 1,100,000,000. It may interest the chairman and the honorable members of the committee that this component, that is the establishment of federal task force, is indeed intended to checkmate what we have considered as a present, a kind of looting of our resources arising from the conspiracy and connivance between the international businessmen and local civil servants that resulted to what we witnessed at the unhealthy effect of fee and ID case, by which Nigeria was to have been reaped of over $10 billion in respect of a contract that was indeed unduly vetted, which created a very unhealthy development in the system. So out of desire to checkmate those kind of occurrences, we have put off a consideration for federal task force and development of federal contracts, which will give us an opportunity to review contracts with such tendencies for the purpose of ensuring that not only Nigeria is saved of the impending liabilities, but then those that are responsible are effectively brought to justice. Your Excellency, I proceed. So again, in relation to citizens' rights, sexual gender-based violence, SGVV, response and torture reduction, which is item 7, where the sum of 95 million has been provided. Press and publications, library, law books, journals, and archives, 90 million has been provided. Information and communication technology, 294 million has been provided, and then coordination of Federal Ministry of Justice activities, 504, and that brings us to a total summation of 3,510,922,295 naira 0 kobo as far as capital expenditure proposal is concerned. However, the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning presented the sum of 3,6,863,591 naira 0 kobo against our capital proposal of 3.5 billion, resulting in a shortfall in the sum of 504 million. The shortfall represents a consolidated project titled Coordination of Federal Ministry of Justice Activities with a cost with a code ERGP 30178008 in the sum of 504,058,704, which consists of the following: renovation of Federal Ministry of Justice headquarters, purchase of medical facilities, annual procurement implementation plan, maintenance of directional signage and the remodeling of ministries' reception, monitoring and evaluation of ministries and 7 parastatals project programs, human capacity building for professional and service department. Distinguished senators, We urge you to consider the inclusion of the projects above in the sum of 504, taking into consideration their major effects. Particularly as it relates to capacity building for professionals, we cannot afford to provide the desired services both in context and in quantum if indeed no capacity building component is provided in the budget. More so, we have a part of it, the component relating to health, relating to monitoring and evaluation of ministers as the parastatals, among others. By way of conclusion, having taken inventory and presented our budget for the 2022 fiscal year, I can safely submit that our efforts are in tandem with all parameters and statutory guidelines. In the light of the foregoing, may I humbly invite distinguished members of the committee to consider and approve our modest 2022 budget of 11,820,446,009 kobo, please. Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, the heads of parastatals under the Federal Ministry of Justice are here, and with your permission, at the appropriate time, I urge you to call on them to make their respective presentations of the budgets relating to the parastatals, the head. I thank you most humbly for the opportunity to make our modest presentation of the Federal Ministry of Justice 2022 budget proposal and the performance report relating to 2021. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, for the opportunity to make this presentation.
Honorable Minister, if we didn't clap from this side, I'm sure you know it's because we don't clap in the Senate. Well, distinguished colleagues, we heard from the Honorable Minister. Let's just take some time to take comments and or questions from distinguished senators. Last year, consistent with our tradition, after you made your presentation and we asked our questions and did the clarifications, we excused you to go and concentrate on other things while we continue with the parastatals under the ministry. But this year, we'll keep you a bit longer for two reasons. Some of your heads of parastatals last year wish you had stayed behind. For whatever reason, I get the fact there was some level of protection that you would have offered, which we denied them by asking you to go. The second reason I would just ask you to stay is because we gave our words to our colleagues in the House, that we'll release you early enough to be able to keep their 2 o'clock appointment. I believe it's 2 p.m. Yes. But what that means is once we are done with the Ministry of Justice budget, we would expect the head of parastatal to also be very prompt, and I believe you are organizing enough so that we can wrap this up early enough. And if there's any agency that we feel is not ready, we'll step the agency down for another day so that we can at least finish early enough. And I still have a quick meeting with the Honorable Minister too after this, so we need to be able to do all of this within time. So distinguished colleagues, yes, question.
The analysis that you gave, Mr. Chairman, there was a difference, an increment of about 2.4 billion in the recurrent, between the recurrent of 2021 and the 2022 estimates. Now, if you come and take a look at the salaries and wages of 2021 and the estimates for 2022, there's a nearly 900 million naira difference. Is it that they were employment during that year? I'd like to know what accounts for the difference and the huge one of the total recurrent that I've already referred to when the chairman. And then again, this one may require an immediate answer if there is. What is the staff trend of the Ministry of Justice, especially the lawyers? The answer to that will lead me to my next question. Honorable Minister.
The ministry is 1,480, out of which we have 860 state councils. And the state councils are entitled to some peculiar allowances that is in their salary scale. When they were computing the salaries for 2021, they didn't take that into account. As a result, there was a shortfall in the personnel cost of the ministry, which resulted in non-payment of September to December salaries. The ministry paid, or the ministry's September salary was paid just about a week ago. And as we're talking, other ministries have received October, but the Federal Ministry of Justice is yet to receive October salaries because Budget Office is still grappling with how to source funds to pay for October. And same issue may recur again for November and for December. As a result of that, there was a little adjustment.
Okay,
Sorry, sir. Yes, sir.
It's okay. That will lead me to my next question.
Okay, sir.
Please.
Sorry, maybe by way of a small elaboration over that issue. For your information, the 860 state council, I'm talking of the lawyers in the service of the ministry, are entitled to annual roving allowance. I think it's around the region of 300,000. So unfortunately, because of the peculiarities of the ministry, that component was not captured, and only for the Federal Ministry of Finance to realize thereafter that there has to be that payment has to be made. So just for information purposes, lawyers, the 860 lawyers in the service of the Federal Ministry of Justice are entitled to 300,000 naira annually of roving allowance. Yes, sir.
Okay, so that brings me to this one. This item that is known as uniforms and other clothing allowance. Would that be what you are talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So how frequently do you do that?
Annually for the lawyers.
Annually.
Once a year.
I don't understand. So every year lawyers will get...
Every year lawyers in public service, generally state and the federal, are entitled to 300,000 to divide their allowance.
I have used my role for more than 10 It's okay. It's okay. Well, it's okay.
It's a tradition.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Well, in the private practice, I use my role for more than 10 years.
Well, I believe the word robe is generally used to ensure that our lawyers, are well presented. So it goes beyond buying that robe. I don't know how much a pair of suits costs now. Yes. 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 Yeah.
I'm not complaining.
No.
I'm not complaining.
He's not complaining.
I'm not complaining. I just wanted to be informed.
In fact, Senator Nala, even when you said 300,000, Senator Nala kept saying only. The National Assembly provides 1 million for the shoes. Honorable Minister, maintain your lane. Okay, any other question? Okay, Senator Mutasi.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Attorney General. I can see the I there, you are the capital expenditure table. Justice sector reform, decentralization of a correctional services system. And for that's for 2021. And I want to informed the Honorable Attorney General that I belong to the Interior Committee of the Senate, and we looked at the correctional service system when we looked at their budget. And we looked at the rations that inmates receive per an individual. And we have been considering that issue for over time. That's something that our inmates should be handled as human beings if we actually intend them to join the society as sane people. They are reformed people, so that if they come to society, they are. But if we intend that because they're on the wrong side of the law and they are incarcerated and they're kept away, that if they come back, they will never be useful to themselves or to the society. And I said that shouldn't be. That we know what happens world over with the correctional services everywhere. With some places, people even from the prisons, they enroll and start and get degrees in the universities. And by the time they are coming, they are properly reformed and join the society. And I don't think we can get to that compared to what's over there, but at least we do something that can be proper for our people. And we talked about this feeding, and we raised that issue with them, that in terms of feeding, that the correctional services have farms, but these farms are managed by them. And we said that the way they're managing the farms is not helpful, because we want that if the farms work very well, they can augment the feeding, that the little money the federal government will bring, you get from the farms and all that. And in this reform, the issue is that in the correctional service, act, we have not done something to take care of bringing private partnership that can take over those farms and run it profitably, get the food, what they will be giving to the government will not be money. They will be bringing food that will now be plowed into the running of the correctional services. So I'm saying that in this reform, that since you brought it here, that you look at it in 2022 with a view to bringing the private sector component into it, so that if we can bring amendment, we do that, because they complained about it, that their hands are tied. They can't go out of the act to do anything meaningful. So now that we are here, I reserve that issue to this meeting, so that I'm bringing it up, that we look at that. We need private partnership in running of the farms. If you bring them, because these farms are everywhere. If you come to the one in Enugu, at Bidolo, it's very big, that if we give a private sector to take over those farms and run, they will do better. But now, they will left them to the prisons. Sometimes they bring inmates to go and work there. They are not doing anything meaningful. And the lines are line fallow. The tractors are out there. Nobody is using them. So if we can do this reform, if you can bring this amendment of injecting private sector into this, I think it will go a long way to solving the problems of our inmates and their upkeep. The other issue I want to say, Mr. Chairman, before I drop, is that by word of comment, I want to say that we appreciate the understanding that is running now with the anti-graft agencies working under your supervision. It wasn't like that before, and that has led to the selling of the Caesar sets and others, and recouping and getting money into the government. It wasn't like that. It was a cat and dog this in the past that hampered your activities. And I want to say that that we are taking note of what's going on, and we encourage you to continue in that manner to make sure that we get every bit of the fund that is required to make sure that it gets into the coffers of the federal government, because we don't have the whole resources now. So all hands are on deck. and what you are doing from your own end that are not even reported there, because you just went in passing and said that we want to corroborate what you are doing and appreciate that effort and want it to continue in that manner. So that most of these items that are wasting out there that you are now handling with the team you put in place can go a long way to make sure that we get all the resources we need for the country. So I thank you for that note.
For the establishment of this federal contract administration system in the ministry. Well, I have no issues with that, but I think if we may suggest what we believe will further aid you, is to say that the ministry can establish an office specifically for this purpose. We used to know that the Director of Civil Litigation under him used to have this contract review and whatever for vetting and the rest, so that adequate records can be kept of all contracts above certain limits to prevent what you said happen in the PID or whatever matter. My concern is this. You see, the more you establish this kind of things, the more cumbersome it becomes. This is the sole responsibility of the Federal Ministry of Justice, to stamp its feet and give a circular that no contract above this should be awarded by any government agency, MDA, without passing through the Ministry of Justice. And if it does not pass, it's as good as null, void, and of no effect. Once we have something of this nature, then we can have this level of control. But you see, from our experience, you establish this kind of thing, and people use it to do something else. The recent experience I'm talking about, the Land Attorney General. The second aspect that I believe the ministry should do in collaboration with the Senate, why can't we come out with a bill that will clearly show how expenditures of government should be carried out by all ministries and parastatals in such a manner as to exclude what is happening now? Because Land Attorney General, we hear a lot of stories that we budget money here, the money reaches the ministries and parastatals, and that contracts, this one is for minister, this one is for PAMSEC, this one is for director. This is what we hear, because we represent the people. And as long as we continue to condone this, then we cannot have any grab on stemming corrupt tendencies. So a clear law that outlaws the involvement of public servants and civil servants in contracts. They have to choose between serving the people in the capacity in which they are occupying or being contractors. But they cannot do the two. So I think if you do this, it will further solidify all the achievements we have recorded as far as the issue of fighting anti-corruption is concerned. Because the concern should not be to recover. We should equally go for that, to lay a platform that makes it impossible for people to steal. And the only way we can do this is if we can put our heads together and come out with something very, very tight that will provide punishment for civil servants who get involved in contracts, and then make sure that the ministry have firm grip of what is happening. This suggestion, I'm very sure, will help you more than verifying. This is what I think. And then on the issue of the 300,000 allowance for lawyers, with the greatest respect, there is difference between state council and federal prosecutors. You cannot be a state council and serving the federal ministry. Federal lawyers under the Federal Ministry of Justice are federal prosecutors under a democracy. And I think that if we take steps to demarcate the nomenclatures so that everybody can bear his father's name, it will be in the best interest of your ministry. These are the two comments that I think I should make, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity.
Particular regards to making necessary amendments to the Correctional Service Act. I agree with the distinguished senator entirely that there are certain needs for further amendments to the Correctional Service Act for the purpose of enhancing the services as it relates to reformation of the correctional service inmates. One thing that I want to state categorically is what we do in terms of transformation of the correctional service in its own right and the services to be deployed for the purpose of bringing the necessary reform in attitude and character of the inmates is a function of law, as we rightly know. When we came over to the National Assembly for the purpose of amending the Prison Service Act, which later came to be known as the Correctional Service Act, the major menace and the mischief that we were targeting to address then were the unprecedented congestion in prison formations. And with that, a lot of innovations were brought in place by way of amendment, among which was giving discretions to the prison service, giving discretion to the staff or the commandants of the prison service to reject inmates when the capacity is overstretched, which discretion was never there before. Bringing on board non-custodial sentences, among others, which had eventually, as of today, nobody is complaining about decongestion in the correctional centers, against the background of the fact that the innovations that were introduced arising from the presentation of the executive and passage of the necessary amendment by the National Assembly are no longer there in the system, and that is why we are no longer hearing about the standing trials, awaiting trials inmates anymore. And I'm happy we are now progressing from the congestion as a threat, as an issue, as a challenge, to considering the possibility of having some additional considerations related to attitudinal change and making the inmates more meaningful. So what I am laboring to state in essence, that the same spirit you have deployed in the amendment of the Act, the Prison Service Act then, by way of a kind of bringing additional amendments that change both the name and spirit to Correctional Service Act, can equally now be deployed in the amendment so as to make the inmates more meaningful. So I assure you, Your Excellency, that I share your spirit, I share your concern, and I share your position, and I think it's an idea that we can work together. More so, being the custodian of the idea in your own right, I think it's an idea you can push through, even by a private bill, that the executive can key into so that we can work together in that direction. But then, let me equally add that we have taken note of this demand, and to some extent it has been accommodated in the Correctional Service Act. For example, as it is now in Kefi, the federal government has put in place an entrepreneurial skill acquisition center. And honestly, when I was made, a pair of shoes was provided to me for my use by that center, I was amazed because it was as good as Gucci in terms of quality, strength, and a kind of attractive outlook. And again, there are other centers where we are promoting the educational pursuit of the inmates, and we have a record of someone that has graduated as a PhD holder arising from such encouragement in prison. So I think it is a matter of intensifying what we are doing and having in place a legal framework that will now lay the foundation for that pursuit. And I will be happy and glad to work with the distinguished senator in the direction of the idea as proposed. Now, on the issue raised by His Excellency distinguished Senator Bala Ibn Allah, my learned senior at the back. Honestly, distinguished Senator, as you rightly observed, those are part of the components that provide the solution to the issues raised. But the task force here being contemplated, it is a task force that is exclusively intended to review the existing problematic contracts that have the capacity to undermine economy, in line with the P&ID, a kind of lessons and experience. In the office of the Attorney General, there exist two fundamental departments relating to the vetting of the contract. For example, the department or directorate of Census Department are charged with the responsibility of vetting anything governmental contract, and they have living up to the desired expectations over time. For the major problem associated with P&ID, that contract was never ever allowed to pass through the office of the Attorney General for vetting. So on account of that, there are embedded in the contract clauses that are inimical to the interest of the nation. And because of the fact that there existed a criminal conspiracy among the key promoters of the contract was never allowed to pass through the Federal Executive Council for approval. Neither was it allowed to pass through the Federal Ministry of Justice for vetting. So the existing structures are there, but they can only act in respect of contracts that are referred to the department. For example, as it is now, even in respect of the government contracts, arising from the fact that China is evolving certain clauses relating to immunity, which some ministries, departments were willing and ready to compromise or allow to pass. We have developed need for either circulars that these are the standard clauses that could be tolerated with the interest, the public interest and the interest of the nation in mind at heart. So what I'm saying in essence that the task force is indeed aimed at looking, because in respect of the P&ID contract, there were about 9 contracts that were signed at the same time in breach of due processes and procedure. And they are there. They simply use the P&ID case as a test case. If it had indeed succeeded in taking away $10 billion out of our economy, those other existing contracts that were signed at the same time in breach could have now been contracts that we are content with, we are faced with in terms of arbitration and associated issues. So the intention of the task force is just an ad hoc arrangement, because if, for example, you localize it to Federal Ministry of Justice, and the Federal Ministry of Justice was the one that was compromised in drafting the agreement, you can't get anything out of it. But then it is about bringing about a comprehensive composition of members responsible that can now look into it. Distinguished Senator Otazie raised the issue of asset disposal as it is. And then what is making it a success as it is today is because all the ministries, departments, and agencies of government were major and critical players in what is being done. For example, if you are talking of vessels, we have the Nigerian Navy, whose responsibility is it to now provide the desired security. If you are talking of the petroleum product content, you have Department of Petroleum Resources, whose responsibility it is to measure and indeed ascertain the authenticity of the product being in contention. So what we are trying to do here is to have a harmonized arrangement of a task force, whereby the police, the EFCC, ICPC, Office of the Attorney General will all be participants in assessing and analyzing this contract, and in respect of each contract that is being reviewed and targeted, we now analyze it to find out who is responsible in one compromise or the other that now subject the federal government to unnecessary liability. So it is a task force that is targeted and reviewing those kind of contracts that have the capacity to bring down our national economy and not intended to be there permanently. Thank you very much, distinguished. I think I am substantially done with the regard, but perhaps maybe on the issue of further strengthening the approach to ensuring at the end of the day that justice is done to agreement, I may equally urge the National Assembly to consider the possibility of having in place a bill that will now perhaps ensure at the end of the day to what extent the interests of the federal government can be protected. What clauses could be tolerated, to what extent? For example, if you are talking of immunity, to what extent? Having a law in place, or if you are equally talking of liability, what are the components as far as the Nigerian state is concerned? Or perhaps what are the processes that a contract is expected to pass through for the liability to now come in place? If, for example, a contract is supposed to pass through the Federal Executive Council for approval, arising from a legal framework put in place by the National Assembly, and apparently it has not passed through, it is only logical that the foundation for legality has not been established. If by the bill it is established that the Office of the Attorney General Solicitor's Department must vet the contract, there has to be an evidence of vetting certificate of a contract in respect of which the federal government is involved by the Office of the Attorney General. In the absence of such certificate of compliance, you can see right from the the composition of the law that you are right arising from a contract is defeated by the prevailing legislation. So I think these are some of the ways and manners that the National Assembly can equally come to the aid of the federal government and establish a foundation that the federal government is not unjustifiably deprived of relevant, deprived of legitimate income through conspiracy of either the civil servants or perhaps a combination of the executive, judiciary, and legislature. And it may interest you to know that the judiciary, for example, there are those, these contracts, there are those that can get any order or judgment from the system. And there are those that are international. For example, they simply have this contract signed, and by tomorrow they rush to international arbitral courts to get judgment against the federal government. And that is what is unfolding arising from V and the ID. There is a kind of strong syndicated conspiracy involving the system, the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. So I think it's something that needs to be factored to mind in terms of consideration for the purpose of giving protection to our limited economic assets, commercial assets. Thank you very much, Excellency.
Is either chairman or vice chairman of another committee, everybody is engaged, and I don't want to also overstretch my love. All the agencies, one after the other, all of you have already submitted your budget performance report as well as your budget proposal. In 1 minute, just speak to your budget performance, letting us know the percentage of performance you have attained in 2021, and then the next 2 minutes speak to your 2022 budget proposal. If you have any question, we will ask you. If you need further clarification, we have the next 1 week to do that. You can always call on me. But we must all work together at the same time now.